Veena from Patter Cake, the channel that's about baking and much more. A warm welcome to my channel.
1 a penny, 2 a penny, hot cross buns. If you have no daughters, give them to your sons. 1 a penny, 2 a penny, hot cross buns. I couldn't resist singing that nursery rhyme. Takes you right back to those carefree kindergarten days, no? Well, as many of you may know, baking hot cross buns is a Lenten time tradition. And now that we are well into the season of Lent, I thought I'd make a video on this much requested recipe. Hot cross buns are soft and fragrant and mildly spiced, have a hint of sweetness and a simple glaze brushed over them, and of course the traditional cross on top. And now it's such a pleasure for me to show you how to make your own homemade hot cross buns from scratch and with ease right here at Patter Cake. The first thing we need to do is sift the flour. Let's sift 2.5 cups of maida or all-purpose flour and set it aside. Next, to this mixing bowl, I'll add 2/3 of a cup, that's 160 ml of hot milk, and to it I'll add a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar. Let's stir this till the sugar dissolves and the milk cools down a little and is just lukewarm, the right temperature for yeast to bloom. In this recipe, you could add either instant dry yeast, like I'll be doing today, or active dry yeast, which you'll have to activate before mixing it with the flour. For this recipe, you need 2 teaspoons of instant dry yeast. If you're using active dry yeast, make that 2.5 teaspoons. Actually, you don't need to activate instant yeast first, but I'll do it for the benefit of those of you who'll be using active dry yeast. Let's mix the yeast and milk well. And then we'll cover the bowl and give the yeast around 10 to 15 minutes to bloom. Like I said, instant dry yeast doesn't have to be set aside to be activated. After adding it to the milk, you could straight away add the other ingredients. It's been 15 minutes now, so let's check the yeast. This is how it should look when it's activated, frothy and bubbly. To this, we'll now add an egg and 1 tablespoon of orange zest. If you don't have a zester, please check out my orange semolina cake video to see how you could get orange zest without using a zester. The link is up here and in the description box below. For added flavor, we'll add half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon and half a teaspoon of grated nutmeg, and also half a teaspoon of salt. If you'll be using unsalted butter in this recipe, you could make that 3/4 of a teaspoon. And then we'll add half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Finally, let's add 3 tablespoons of partially melted salted butter. The butter has to be very soft, like this. Let's whisk this mixture well. It's now time to add the sifted maida to the other ingredients. We'll add the maida in small portions and initially mix the dough with a wooden spoon till we have a shaggy mass like this. Now let's transfer the dough to a well-dusted work surface. I've dusted this bowl with 1 teaspoon of maida. Now I'll dust around half a teaspoon on my palms and start kneading the dough. We'll stretch it out and fold it back on itself. We'll continue kneading the dough like this for around 5 minutes, till it's smooth and elastic. If you find the dough is too sticky, add a little flour to it, but not too much. And if it's too dry and firm, add a little milk to it. around half a teaspoon at a time. Our dough is now ready to be proofed. I'll grease the inside of this bowl in which we had mixed the dough ingredients with a little oil and transfer the ball of kneaded dough to it. I'll also add a little oil to my fingers and grease the top of the dough ball so that it doesn't dry out and form a skin on top when it is left to proof. We'll now cover the bowl and keep it in a warm place to let the dough proof and rise till it doubles in size. That could take around 1 to 1.5 hours. I usually turn on my oven for a minute and turn it off after the inside has warmed up just a little, and then let the dough rise in my turned off oven. In the meanwhile, we'll plump up the raisins that we'll be using in this recipe. This is half a cup of golden raisins, but you could also use dark raisins instead. I'll now add just enough hot water to this bowl to cover the raisins. I'll place a lid on this bowl, and after the raisins have soaked in the water for around an hour, I'll drain off the excess water and lightly pat the raisins with a clean kitchen towel to dry them a little. After 1.25 hours, my dough has risen well and has doubled in volume. Let's degas it and then turn it out onto my work surface. Let's flatten it and draw it out into a rectangle, and then spread the plumped up raisins on it. Now let's fold 1/3 of the flattened dough from one side like this, and then fold the other 1/3 portion. Let's roll this folded dough up and then knead it lightly to distribute the raisins as evenly as possible within the dough. Then shape the dough into a log and then divide it into 2 parts. I'll shape each part into a thick disc. And then just eyeball it and divide each disc into 5 more or less equal parts. Let's shape each part into a ball by pulling up the dough from the sides to the center and then forming a sort of pouch like this that will be smooth at the bottom. I'll press the pinched part down, turn the dough ball over, cup it with my hand and move it around in tight circles to form a smooth ball. Let's place this on a parchment paper lined baking tray. Let's shape another dough ball. And here are the first 5 balls positioned around an inch apart. Let's move on to the second disc and shape the remaining balls. For the second rising, I'll put each of these trays into a large plastic bag. You could also use plastic wrap instead. I've oiled the underside of the top of the bag to prevent the plastic from sticking to the risen dough balls. I'll keep this in a warm place to rise till the balls have doubled in size. The second rising could take around an hour. After around 45 minutes, let's prepare the paste for the crosses that we'll pipe on top of the buns. Here I have a 1/4 cup of maida. To it, I'll add 1 tablespoon of powdered sugar. Now let's make a thick paste with a little water, adding around a tablespoon at a time. That's 2 tablespoons. The paste needs a little more water, say around half a tablespoon. Let's whip this up again. In all, I've added 2.5 tablespoons of water. This is how the consistency should be. I'll now transfer this paste to a piping bag, whose tip I'll snip off later on. If you don't have a piping bag, you could use any clean, empty plastic bag or Ziploc bag, and after transferring the paste to it, snip off a corner. Let's set this aside for now. After 1 hour, the dough balls have doubled in size. Now let's pipe across on each of them. I'll bake these in my preheated oven at 170 degrees centigrade, that's 350 Fahrenheit, for 20 minutes or so. These took exactly 20 minutes to bake. And here's the second tray. These buns too were done in 20 minutes. While they are still warm, the tops of the hot crust buns have to be brushed with a glaze, which you could prepare by thinning some light colored jam like apricot jam with a little water. Or else use a sugar syrup like this as a simple glaze. I added 2 tablespoons of sugar to 2 tablespoons of water, brought the syrup to a boil and immediately turned off the heat. This syrup is now at room temperature. Let's brush the top of each bun with this glaze. Here are the 10 plump hot cross buns that we just baked. Let me show you the texture. They are so soft and perfectly baked. Okay, let me tear one up to show you the inside. Really soft and so fluffy. Now I'll slice one bun open. This should give you a better idea of its amazing texture. Soft and fragrant hot cross buns can be buttered or enjoyed with a little jam or eaten just plain as they are. Of course, you could buy hot cross buns from a nearby bakery, but I'm telling you, they'll taste nothing like your soft, homemade hot cross buns. So do give this recipe a shot. You'll be so glad you did. And don't forget to subscribe and give me some feedback. I really love hearing from you. Until we meet again, happy cooking!